Apart from the decisions reached by automation, what will the method of decision-making be in an NLRBE, and does it have a name? Well, yes, yes there is. It's called the scientific method. And in this context, it's the scientific method applied to social and environmental concern. I mean, a lot of people in the movement, they just say the scientific method applied to social concern, but I would like to think that that the environment does actually come into it as well. So, I define it as that as well. But an example of how such a decision can be arrived at instead of made, well, there's an example that has been bandied around for a little bit, and I think it's a perfect example of, say for example, if you have a plot of land and you have 4 people sharing this plot of land, and they each live in one of the corners of the land, right? So it's a rectangular piece or a square piece of land with 4 corners, and they each live in the 4 corners. Now, generally in our democratic way of arriving at decisions, when faced with the problem of all 4 of them wanting to plant one apple tree on that land, democratically we would think, oh, it's probably more even for everyone to plant the tree right in the middle of the land, so it isn't too close to Bob, or it isn't too close to Susan, or too far away from Kevin, or too far away from Thomas, whatever. But that would be the seemingly intuitive way to answer that question. Put it in the middle, that's fairest, no one suffers or benefits too much, right? Wrong. The correct way to arrive at the decision of where to plant the apple tree is, where is the best point on the land in which to grow an apple tree? If the idea is to essentially give birth to a form of plant life that requires optimal soil conditions and environmental conditions, then putting it right in the middle, that isn't necessarily the best place. What if right in the middle is a place that where all the topsoil is dead, and there's no sunlight because all the trees around that area are really tall and block out all the sunlight? What if that is right in the middle of your land? Do you say, yeah, we'll plant it there just because it's in the middle? No, you don't. You think, where's the best place on the plot of land to plant the tree? Where's the best place for pH levels in the soil? The best kind of irrigation, sunlight, all these considerations. If you want to plant an apple tree, you want to plant it in the best place possible to grow an apple tree. I mean, you don't necessarily have to, put a building down where the topsoil is best, because a building doesn't need topsoil in order to be a better building. A tree needs awesome soil in order to be able to grow in, because then it can grow up strong. And especially if it's an apple tree, because obviously why would they want to plant an apple tree? Could it be because they want to eat apples? Oh yeah, so would you say that planting the tree in the best place possible for the tree would be beneficial to the fruit that the tree produces, and thus, providing a food need for the people who are planting it? Well, of course. That's essentially a scientific way to look at the question. When we apply the scientific method to it, obviously the scientific method being the 4 or 5 stage, depending on how you define each of the steps, observation, testing, conclusion, repetition, and it just goes round and round. You basically, analyse the soil on all parts of the land and find where the soil is the best. And you also go round on the land, see where the best places of sunlight are. and you correlate all these results together, and you use that data to basically say, right, well, here you got good soil but not so good sunlight. Here you got, and then you find the place where all the variables are the best. And that's where you plant the tree. See, scientific way to approach problems, But anyway, question 3. In the future model, with wave and wind turbines, etc., who is going to build those turbines? What resources are they going to use? Using what materials, mined from where, with what manufacturing processes, design resources, power sources, transportation infrastructure, etc. And who maintains them, using what resources, with what incentive? Okay, quite a lot. Your first one, it depends on if we have the tech in place to manufacture them, then to assemble on site. If you have like the necessary machinery and infrastructure to create them, then go right ahead. There's actually a video. I think it was a talk or it was a short video by Jacques Fresco called was it Selferecting Structures? I think it was called. He made it. I think a couple of decades ago, actually. But that's pretty interesting. But I mean, there are systems that are in place right now, such as contour crafting machines. It's basically a large scale sort of matter fabricator where it's essentially a huge 3D printer, and there's videos that you can look up online, like time-lapse videos of skyscrapers being built with contour crafting machines, and they take a fraction of the time that conventional construction takes. There's a I think Federico Pistono, he gives an example of this during his I think it was a Z-Day presentation that he did called "Robots Will Steal Your Job." Yeah, I think it was Z-Day 2012, the main event where Federico gave a talk. But yeah, he called, I think it was 2011 or 2012, called it "Robots Will Steal Your Job," and there he shows a time-lapse video of a skyscraper being constructed with a contour crafting machine. But in self-erecting structures, there's also things like mold extrusions, where there's like a standardized mold for like the foundational skeleton of maybe a floor of a building, or an extrusion mold for an individual sort of like apartment dwelling sort of thing. I mean, there's so many things you can do. And also in terms of the actual parts themselves, I mean, obviously in wave turbines or tidal systems, that 3D printed parts wouldn't necessarily be vulnerable to seawater erosion. So this is a problem that a lot of offshore manufacturers are finding, that all their parts, because they're submerged in seawater all the time, they get eroded, because the materials that they use to construct all the parts are weakened over time by continual exposure to salt water. It's brine isn't brine is it's not completely tech friendly, but we're able to overcome things like that. The mining or refining, if required, it will be done as locally as possible. I mean, one of the reasons why using 3D printers to create infrastructure is that you already have the resources that can be mined from existing materials. You can reverse engineer materials now to actually break down their constituent parts and just look into how advanced 3D and I think 4D printing. Yeah, 4D printing. Look it up, guys. There's ways of being able to do things where you can actually, create your own molecules for even medications. Designing medications specifically for you, because your own physiology and biochemistry is taken into consideration. Just think about that, man. But that's besides the point. We're talking about infrastructure construction. But automated transport obviously would be required to move materials and so forth. There's the potential for self-driven machines is unparalleled. Even Google have said. The mainstream media have even reported that by this time next year, Google want to have a fleet of self-driven cars on Britain's roads. Yeah. So, automated transport is very, very close by. There's a lot of people that try to scaremonger about this sort of thing, but just think about it in terms of the scene from Back to the Future Part 3 where Doc Brown is in the bar and he's telling all the guys about the future and what technology we will have, and all these people are laughing their asses off at him when he's just describing about the internal combustion engine. When he's talking about cars, they were laughing at him. So it's not outside the realm of possibility, considering that, how far we've actually come. There are multiple companies that are devoted to the production of, the development of self-drive systems in cars, But as for who will do it, who will supervise it, the people who want to and can, and their incentive for doing it, because that is their passion, right? If in a resource-based economy, people will take their personal passions and turn them into a life's pursuit. And I tell you what, I can guarantee that the vast majority of you, this certainly includes me, but the vast majority of you listening have interests that you would pursue as a hobby if you could afford it. There are things that you would love to do, but what's stopping you? Money, lack of money, or a lack of time in your lives to be able to pursue it, because most of your life is spent being a slave to money. It's not necessary in a resource-based economy. People will take their passions and pursue those. They will become your quote-unquote job. But anyway, moving on to the next question. Question 4, what sort of effect would it have if the top 10 richest people in the world decided to try to withdraw all their money from banks all at once? Is there enough physical money to do it? If they managed to do it and they had these billions, and he puts in brackets trillions, of pounds sitting there as a physical item, if they decided to then destroy it all, how would that leave the world's economy? It's not like the banks could go ahead and print new notes of all the cash they destroyed, is it? Okay, good question, and quite dense as well. I'll do my best to break it down. Your first question, to answer that, there isn't enough physical currency in existence that can tender the bank balances of the richest, the top 10 richest people. There's just no way. There's more money there's more numbers, supposed numbers pertaining to certain wealth, on on their behalfs than there is money to actually back it and to substantiate it. I mean, even the total debt of planet Earth exceeds multiples of the total GDP of every country on this planet combined. You know, I think it's something like the gross, the global debt is, I think it's something like between 12 and 20 times the combined GDP of every country. Yeah, it's a bit like the difference between the threat of swine flu and the fear of swine flu. You know, I mean, I worked in the one place where all the people who were suspected of having swine flu were admitted in the Kent and Sussex region of England. I worked in that one ward before, during and after the whole swine flu problem. There were in excess of 20, maybe 30 patients admitted throughout this time period, suspected of having swine flu. Guess how many tested positive? 2. So the fear of swine flu was far greater than the threat of swine flu. This is the same thing with the amount of money that actually supposedly exists, all the numbers that pertain to something. There's that, and then there's the physical currency that has to represent it, right? The amount of physical currency that has to represent it nowhere near matches the amount of money that supposedly exists in, like, you know, numbers. It's just not gonna fly. But I question whether a single one of them would be able to get all their cash out without creating a complete cash vacuum, not just of the bank, but of the whole system itself. It will be like I don't know. It will be like having a big bag full of stuff, and then you just suddenly yank all the stuff out. The bag's going to collapse down, isn't it? It's going to be empty. It's going to collapse under the weight of its own external fabric. Like if you have a big duffel bag and then all of a sudden you take everything out. But even if there was enough cash in existence, such an action would force the bank to close. This is what we call a bank run. You know, where the physical currency held by the branch is exhausted before the account holders can withdraw the currency they think is held there. You know, an example that sticks out most to me in regards of UK banks is look up Northern Rock 2007. Now, back in the year 2007, Northern Rock had a bank run. And it was all over the news, like people thinking, well, why would we let this happen? You know, but yeah, that's the one that sticks out most in my mind. Your second question, I'm not actually sure what would happen in this scenario. I mean, I'm convinced that any banker would withdraw all their cash, turning around to the, I don't think that any of them would just be like, withdraw all their cash and then turn around to their colleagues, like the Joker, and just say, I'm only burning my half. You know, is any banker going to be doing that? I don't know. But suffice it to say, this would be devastating to currency circulation, and thus GDP will fall. You know, I'm not even sure if the mint would be able to compensate for the loss before severe structural destabilization occurred in all corners of the system. You know, like I said with, taking the stuff out of the bag. You know, there's a certain point where, gravity starts acting, and where there's no resistance down. But anyway, question 5. How do we overcome people's sense of entitlement? Example, their sense that they are entitled to own things, to make profit, to have people work for them, in brackets, slaves, and so on. Okay, well, this sense of entitlement is, again, it's an outgrowth of scarcity and property. There's it's essentially the value reinforcement for property. I mean, if people weren't conditioned with the idea that they're entitled to certain things, then we wouldn't, especially if those things. I mean, if those things are, things like water, medical care, the right to have a, shelter, or that, things like that. Yes, we can feel entitled to those because they are life needs. If we don't have those, we die. So it makes sense to say, yes, you're entitled to those things because obviously without them you would die. But when it comes to that's when it comes to needs. But when it comes to wants, when it's things like I'm entitled to a private jet, or I'm entitled to the the deeds to buildings and whatever that and even if I do nothing with them, I leave them derelict for years and years on end, to the point where they have to be knocked down because they've decayed so much over time. That's my right. There are people homeless out on the street, and I own a property that could house them and could keep them alive because it's protecting them from the elements and maybe keeping them a little warm. I could do that, but no, I'm entitled to my property, so how dare they demand shelter as a human? See, this is the kind of mentality that this system has created. It creates the entitlement to things and the withhold, because the very idea of property is really, it's mine, not yours. That's really the idea of property when it comes down to the things that we're conditioned to want. No one goes to like a water fountain and said, "This is mine, not yours." No, it's for everyone. No one has an ownership claim over it. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it comes from scarcity, and when we have the technology to eradicate scarcity, then the need for property, and thus, by extension, the idea of entitlement of property goes away. But there's a difference between wanting your own things, like, for example, a mobile phone. I would say that it's a good idea for human beings who, whether they choose to stay in one place or whether they wish to travel around, I would say that it's a good idea that that said people have maybe some kind of device with them at all times, that if they need to contact anyone for any reason at all, even if it's just for emergency purposes, like, say, for example, if they get mugged or are involved in a car crash and they're still conscious, in order to be able to sound the alarm, or if something happens, then they can call people for assistance and whatever. I think that would be a good idea, and especially with the technology, we can have something that you can access the internet on a pair of glasses, Google Glass. There's even, I think there's even people who have made porn use it. Yeah, I think that the first porn film has been made using the Google Glass, and I'll bet you guys are furiously Googling that right now. Get away, get your minds out of the gutter. Don't worry, I'm going to be Googling it later. But yeah, the idea that, that someone that can be yours per se, it wouldn't necessarily be yours because no one else should have one. It's that This one has things on it which you use. It has contacts which are relevant to you. If someone else stole your phone, how would they find... I mean, besides any kind of sort of... I could probably think of a couple of scenarios where a stranger's phone address book is going to be useful to you if you're going to do something bad. But in general, if you look at someone else, like a stranger's phone, you look through all these names. These people are strangers as well. Why would you want this? Why can't you just have your own and you got your own contacts? That's why, phones are a utility. It serves a function and it's specialised for different people. So, for example, if you like playing games on your mobile phone, you have options to download certain games, and you don't have to download other things that you might not like. And if you get a stranger's phone, they got, like, say for example, if you don't like chess, and the only game they have is chess, because the only game they like is chess, how could you have fun playing games on this mobile? You can't. And what if the person has it set up where, like, say for example, if the chess game came as standard with the operating system, like some games come free with certain computers, and that was really the only game they needed. So they with the contract that they made with the phone, would you like to download extra content? Well, no, it's already got the chess on there, and that's the only game that I'll need. So I won't need to download anything. So no, I won't consent to having to pay more for games that I won't even need to download. There's so many ways to look at things like this, but not just that, but the final element that some of you may already be thinking and wondering why the hell I'm not covering this. But phones can do so much more than just call other people. Phones are computers in of themselves, and they are fast outmoding so many other real-world processes that even require human employees. Things like the app. The idea of the app is slowly outmoding so many things. I tell you what, there's a brilliant documentary called Will Work for Food. It was done by Sam Vallely, and it's over 2 hours, but don't let that put you off. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people have watched this already, but it's a brilliant film, and it really taught me a lot of things, and especially it's relevant to the UK because Sam Vallely, he speaks with a Scottish accent, so I assume he's Scottish. But yeah, I mean, there's like some of the things, because I used to work for Game, and when I found out about Game going bust in 2012, that was like, that was I think shortly. Was that before or after I worked for them? I can't remember, but I think it was after. But yeah, that was interesting to find out things that were actually relevant. But, a phone can do so much more, and is increasingly doing more. So when it comes to things like that, the idea of needing loads of different things. I mean, for one thing, my phone, I don't need to have a separate device such as a still camera. I mean, I use my own camcorder for proper high definition, video capture. But for like individual snapshots and stuff, I use the camera on my phone. I don't need to carry a separate device known as an MP3 player because my phone acts as an MP3 player as well. I don't have a robust internet connection on my phone because it's I don't have an iPhone or a smartphone or a BlackBerry or Blueberry. I don't have a Blueberry or a BlackBerry. Yeah, I think the BlueBerry is the phone specifically for surfing adult websites. I think, but.